Hello Year 6. This week's computing lesson you are going to be programming a Catch the Dots game. So let's have a look at what the final product will look like. So let's click the green flag and we can use the arrow keys to rotate the wheel, and we have to catch the dots that match the colour of the wheel. And we have a score and we have lives. So if I touch the wrong colour, then I would lose lives and it's game over and the game stops. So let's begin by logging into Scratch. So on Google, you're going to search Scratch and click the first link and sign in with your Scratch login. So remember that's your Frog login, but without the 0.307 and the password is computing. We then need to go to Create. And we're going to start a new project. Now give it a name. We can call it Catch the Dots and file Save Now. We're going to begin by deleting our cat sprite, so just press the bin icon. We're then going to upload our own sprite. So with your work this week, I have attached the image file of the wheel that you need to use. So we'll go to the sprite and we'll move up and click Upload Sprite. You then need to go to your downloads and upload the controller image. And then you can move it into the middle. Now that's very big, so we can reduce the size to 50 and move it into the middle. So our first step is to move the controller right when we press the right arrow, and then to move the controller left when we press the left arrow. So remember, all code needs to start with the green flag clicked event, so we're going to drag that onto our code. We then need to have a control block for forever, so it's continuously checking if the right or left arrow key is being pressed. We then need to go to control again and use an if then block. So this is going to be used to detect if the key is being pressed. So we're going to go to sensing and then use the key pressed block, and you can see the shape. We can fit it into the if then block. And if we want it to move right, we need to press the right arrow. We can then go to motion and use the turn degrees block. So drag that inside the if block, and we just want to set it as 3. Now let's test our program so far. So press the green flag. When I turn using the right arrow key, you can see it happening on the stage. Now we need to repeat this for the left arrow key, so I can go to my if statement and duplicate that, and then just put it not inside the other if block. We need to place it underneath, but still in the forever block. And then we're going to change this to the left arrow, but we don't want it to turn right, we want it to turn left. So I can just remove this and use the turn left arrow and change it to 3. When I press play, I can move it right and I can move it left. We are now going to move on to step 3, which is gain points or lose lives. So we need to create a new sprite called red, and we're going to do this for each of the colours, so one in red, yellow and blue. Now you can draw your own sprite, but I think there's an easier way to do this. So we're going to go to the sprite button and search. I'm then going to search for 4 or circle, and then I can choose this here. I can then click on the sprite and go to costumes, and I can then pick the colour that I want, or I can change the colour. So I'm going to use the paint tool and make sure I make the colour red, and then the paint tool, and then click on it, and now it's changed the colour. Then at the top I can click code, and it's still a little bit too big for what we are doing, so let's check the size that they did. So it's quite a small dot, so let's reduce this size to 30, and we have our first dot. So we don't want this to be called all. So when you click on the sprite, you can change the name. So double click or press backspace, and we can change it to red. Now, in the instructions, it says that we are going to hide the sprite at the beginning, and we're going to create a new clone of the sprite every few seconds so that it looks like it's coming from the side. So make sure you're no longer on the controller, but you are now clicking the red sprite. We need to go to events, so when flag clicked. So at the beginning, we're going to make it hide so that it's not visible. So we'll go to looks, and we will scroll down until we see hide and drag that there underneath. It then says that we're going to wait 2 seconds and forever create a clone and then wait a random amount of seconds. So again, if you're not sure, you can always open your task to the side and your program on the other side. So let's go to control, and we're going to wait 2 seconds. We are then going to use a forever block underneath, and we want to create a clone. So still in the control category, we're going to go down, and it says here create clone of myself inside the forever block. Then we need wait 1 second. Now it says here pick random 5 to 10. So this is a random generator. We're going to go to operators and then pick random, drag it inside the wait block and change the 1 to a 5. Now when we click the green flag, it looks like nothing is happening because we've hidden the red sprite. We are now going to add some code to make each new clone appear in one of the 4 corners of the stage so that it makes it look like it's coming from the corners of the screen towards the controller. So for this we need to create a list called start positions so that it can choose random positions from the corners, and it has 2 values. The first is -180 and the second is 180. So we need to go to variables, and then we need to click on the button make a list, and we'll call this start position and press OK. It will then appear on your stage. So then on the bottom left hand side there's a plus symbol, so we're going to click on that. We're going to add our first value -180. We're then going to click on it again and add our second value 180. If you uncheck this mark here in the variables, it will make it disappear from the stage. The next thing that we need to do is we need to make our sprite move towards the controller. So this means we need a starting position and how it moves towards it. So if we go to control and we scroll all the way down, it says when I start as a clone. We need this because it's going to be creating a clone of itself every 2 seconds. So when I start as a clone, we then need to set the start position. So go to motion and select go to X and Y. We then need to use a random generator to choose a random position from the list that we created earlier. So we're going to go to variables and use the item of start position block. We're going to drag that inside X, and we're going to drag that inside of Y. Now, because we want it to choose randomly between 1 and 2, so the game is completely random, we need to go to operators, and we need to use the pick random block. So we're going to drag that inside of the number 1. Now, if you look at the list, it has 1 and it has 2. So we need to pick a random number between 1 and 2, so it can choose randomly between those 2 values. We can then use another pick random inside of Y and set that to 1 and 2 as well. So I can go back to variables and uncheck it so that it disappears from my code. We then want it to point towards the controller so that it moves in that direction. So I'm going to go to motion and use point towards, drag that underneath. Then I can click on the drop down and select controller, I then want it to show after it's been created and moving towards it. So go to looks and scroll down and use show. We then want it to move continuously one step towards it. So we're going to use a control block and we're going to use repeat until. And here we need a sensing block. So when it touches the controller, we don't want it to move anymore. So sensing and then touching. And we're going to change mouse pointer to controller. Then we go to motion and we want it to move one step. Now, after you finish programming this game, you can make it more difficult by making the dots move faster. So at the moment it's moving at 1, but if I change it to 5 and I press the green flag, it moves much quicker and it makes the game more difficult. So just remember that if you'd like to improve your game later on. Now we are going to add code to create 2 new variables for lives and school. So I'm going to go to variables and click on make a variable and then type lives and then make another variable called school and press OK. So we are then going to go back to our controller sprite, so make sure you click on it here, and we can use another event block. So when flag clicked, we want our variables to be set. So we want our lives to be set to 3 and we want our score to be set to 0. Now we want to add this code to make it stop everything when it reaches less than 1 life. So that means when it reaches 0 lives. So we are going to use a wait until block, so control and wait until. We're then going to need a operator to check if it is less than 1, so drag that inside, so remember the less than symbol. And then we need to go to our variables. So if the lives are less than 1, then we want our game to stop completely. So we'll go to control and go down and it says stop all and drag that underneath. Now it's time to return to the red sprite, and this is where we are going to check if it is touching the colour, and that means that they will either gain a point or lose a life. So we're going to begin by making it move 5 more steps so that it overlaps the controller, because at the moment it has a black border, so we want to make sure that it detects the colour. So we're going to go to motion and move right underneath when I start as a clone block of code, move 5 steps. It then wants us to detect if it's touching the colour, so we need an if-else block. So we'll go to control and we'll use an if-else block and drag that underneath. So we need a sensing, and we did this at school when we detected colour. So if touching colour, we drag that inside. You can click on this colour and then use the colour drop tool and select the red because we are coding the red sprite. We then need to detect the colour that it's touching. So we've done this in class. We use the if touching colour block, drag that inside. So you can click the colour and then use the colour picker tool and then select red. That means that the player has correctly matched the colour to the sprite. So that means we need to change our lives or score variable. So in this case, we'll change the score. So drag change inside the if block and change it to score. And we want to give them 1 point. Otherwise, if it's not touching the red colour, then we're going to change lives so that it takes a life away. So we need to change that to -1. The program then asks us to add a sound. So we can go to sound and drag that underneath. And then we can drag another one under the else block. So if there's no sound here, you can go to sounds and then add a sound. So it says in the program that we use laser. So select that. And now that you've added it, when you go back to your code and you click on the drop down, you can change it. It then mentions that we want to delete this clone because we no longer need it. So we'll go to Control and go down until we find delete this clone and put it at the bottom. Now, instead of coding everything from scratch, we're just going to duplicate our sprite and change the color and the name. So on your red sprite, you're going to right click and duplicate. Then when you're on red 2, you can click on the name and change it to blue. And then you can duplicate that and you can change it to yellow. So to change the color, you need to click on the sprite and then go to costumes and then choose the color that you want. I'll choose blue and then use the paint bucket tool and click on it and then just click the next sprite and change the color and then paint over it. So now we have red, blue and yellow. But if you remember, we had to detect the color in our code. So we need to go to blue and make sure that we change the if touching color block. So click on the red and the color picker tool and choose blue for blue. And then go to yellow and click on the color again and click on yellow for yellow. So far, let's press play. We have 3 lives and we have our score. Now they are moving very quickly. And see how fast it's moving. So still moving 5 steps, so change that to 1. Make sure you change it for blue as well. And for yellow, let's try again. And I've got lots of colours at once. Seems impossible. But we do have the lives. Now sometimes when you play the game, you can see that the dots sometimes gets created on top of each other because there's only 2 random values to choose from. So we need to go to the yellow sprite and go to events when flag clicked, and it says that we want it to hide and wait for 4 seconds. So go to looks and use hide, and then we will go to control and wait for 4 seconds. We then need to do this for the blue dots, but we're going to do 6 seconds instead. So we need the event when flag clicked, and we need looks. So we'll hide, and we will wait 6 seconds. So let's press the green flag, and they are no longer being created on top of each other. And that seems a little bit easier as well. Now in your task sheet, there is a challenge that you can do where you can make the dots move faster, like we mentioned before. You can also create a high score by creating a new variable if you like. There's also other challenges you can use to improve your game. So I hope you have fun, and I will end the video by showing all of the code so that if you need to, you can look back on it and make sure that you got it correct. So this is the code for the controller, and this is the code for the red sprite, the code for the blue sprite, and the code for the yellow sprite as well. I hope you enjoyed programming this game. Good luck!